Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Normally on a Friday I would bring you my wee weekly wrap up, but this week life has just been so hectic. It's been trying to kick my ass and I've done everything I can to not let it. But I've not read anything this week. I think I've read about 100 pages, which is not really worth talking about. So I thought instead, let's just do something fun to just a good end to a less than good week. So I'm going to bring you my perfect book challenge. I first saw this on, I think it was Elliot Brooks's channel. And I will try and find the original content creator and tag them and link them down below. But basically the purpose of this challenge is to choose a different author or a book depending on the various prompts to write various, like all the different aspects of your perfect book. So the author that you would want to write the characters, or the book inspired you want your characters inspired by, or the one who do you want to take care of the prose, who do you want to take care of the plot. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense, and if not, it'll make sense as we get into it. So first off, the intro. I've gone with Tyler Hayes, who wrote The Imaginary Friend. I recently did a review on The Imaginary Friend. I absolutely adored it, and I've specifically chosen him for the intro because his prologue for The Imaginary Friend was a page long. It was 1 page long, and by the end of that 1 page I was completely invested. I absolutely adored the characters. I knew the writing style was for me. I was almost crying at one point. Like, it was just, in that 1 page he managed to achieve almost perfection. So he knows how to just like really hook you in. Or at least I think he does. He's only written 1 book, but I've got my fingers crossed for more. Next is prose. Who would I want to take care of the prose? So I've gone with Benjamin Elier-Saenz. I think that's how you pronounce it, and if I've just butchered it, I do apologise. But he wrote Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. I've just recently finished Waters of the World, and you will get a review for that soon. Maybe Monday or Tuesday. I chosen him for prose because he has just such an amazing, incredible way with words. It's so incredibly accessible, but it's so vivid. He writes in such a way that is so vivid, and it's full of imagery, and I think technically it could be described as purple prose. There is quite flowery, and you can tell he's put a lot of effort into it, but it never once detracts from the plot or anything. I sometimes find that with, like, if too much effort has been put into just making all the sentences beautiful and just making it sound so pretty, that it can really take me away from the story. But Elier-Saenz has just totally knocked it out of the park with this. 10 out of 10. His writing is just, it's beautiful. I can only describe it as beautiful. So the next up is world building. For world building, I've gone with Raymond Feist and Johnny Wirtz. They wrote the Empire, I think it's just the Empire trilogy, set within the Rift War overarching saga of Raymond Feist. Oh, sorry, excuse me. It's a little bit cold in here. I've gone with those. I first read this trilogy, I think I was about 14 or 15, so more years ago than I want to admit to. And even now, I think if I were to pick them up, I'd still know exactly where about in the world I am. I'd still know what's happening. They managed to create this world. I think it's Asian inspired, possibly Korean inspired, but I could be wrong about this. But they managed to make it and create it in such a way that I could see the world. I don't often see pictures when I read. I mean, I get the feelings and I can kind of get the sensation of it. But I don't necessarily see pictures when I read. And with this trilogy, I almost could. You could plot me in a room and I could tell you what was in all of the rooms. So I think they did such a wonderful job. It was so just very detailed and brilliant without letting the detail bog you down. The next prompt is magic system. Now, I almost went with Brandon Sanderson for this, um, but I managed. He slotted in a bit better somewhere else. So what I've actually chosen for this one is N.K. Jemisin. This summer I read her Broken Earth trilogy, and I think what she did with the magic system in that was just so utterly unique, just so incredibly wonderful. It had limitations, it made sense, and I find it absolutely fascinating. So I want an author to write me a magic system that I find absolutely fascinating, and I really think she could pull. Like she could. I say I think she could. I know she could because she has. She has pulled it off. The next is characters. Who do I want to write characters? I, I almost went with Hobb for this one because it's Robin Hobb, but I put her somewhere else instead. For this one, I've gone with Frederick Backman. He is another author that I discovered this year who is becoming a favourite, and characters are his forte. Plots sometimes can be a little bit on the simpler side and sometimes a bit more on the ridiculous side, but his characters are just so incredibly real. You laugh with his characters, you cry with his characters, you want to hug his characters. I want to hug all of his characters. He has such a way, he just totally brings them to life that they could easily be someone just walking down the street. They could be your next door neighbor. By the end of the book, you know so much about them that you feel like you've known his characters for years. So yeah, Friedrich Backman for characters. The next one is plot. This is where I've put Sanderson. So I have only read Mistborn and a quick novella, The Emperor's Soul. But what he did with Mistborn just impressed me so much. I've also done a recent review for Mistborn, which I continually called him a genius. I think I called him a plotting genius at one point. So it just makes sense to put him in plot. He makes really strong, complex plots. The foreshadowing is subtle as a sledgehammer. It is so blunt that you don't see it half the time. And it's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yeah. The next prompt is action and battles. I struggled with this one a lot. I read a fair amount of fantasy, but I don't necessarily focus on action scenes. They're not my favourite parts. I much prefer scenes where I've got a lot of character interaction, magic happening. I don't necessarily care for the battle, like army against army, man against man, woman against man, whatever. So yeah, I struggled with this one a bit. So I've gone for John Gwynne, just because not obviously I've just recently read Malice, and I wouldn't go so far as to say I enjoyed the battle scenes because it's always going to be a stretch to say I really enjoy a battle scene, but I liked the way he did that. I never felt lost within it. I always knew what was happening. I knew where limbs were. If someone was fighting someone and they're like chopping at him with an axe or slashing with a sword or whatever, I knew what was happening. I have occasionally read action or battle scenes, like fight scenes in particular. If I'm gonna, like, most of the fantasy I read will involve some sort of like fight rather than a battle, where it all happens in such a flurry that I'm like, and then he did this and then he did that, and there's like, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, and then I end up skim reading until okay, so my character won, or like this happened, okay. But John Gwynne, I never really felt the need to skim through a lot of the action scenes, so that works for me. What's next? Next is humor. Yeah. For humor, I've gone with Andy Weir. So I first read Andy Weir, first read The Martian, a few years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I think it was not long after it had been released, before the movie was released, definitely. And I loved that sort of like dry, sarcastic humor that goes throughout it. It ticked all my buttons. I like humor within a book without outright trying to be funny. I like humor that comes through character personalities rather than just through a series of jokes, and it just worked perfectly. And he managed to blend it in so well with the situation that, yeah. The next one is romance. Again, this is another one I struggled with a bit. I read a fair amount of like historical romance, but I don't. I don't necessarily want those authors writing my romance. It doesn't make sense, does it? Mostly because I know that a lot of the historical romance I read is fluffy and smutty and terrible, and can be quite problematic. So I actually went with Emily Organ, who she writes the Penny Green mystery series, which I know I've spoken about a couple of times recently, and there will be a review coming for that at some point when I finish the book. But I really like she managed to master this slow burn romance, it spanned books and books. I mean, it's she's on book 11. And we're still following like the same characters, and I really liked how she handled it. She had the potential to go down the love triangle trope, and she didn't, and she navigated it so well. She put them in situations that really made sense for the books and for the plot and for the characters. And yeah, they just, I don't know, there was always at least one or two scenes in every book that just gave me all the fuzzy feelings and just, oh, made me, you know? So yeah, Emily Organ. I don't need romance to be a huge part of my book. I like it as, I don't, unless I'm in the mood for something super fluffy and trashy. I keep pointing to the Julia Gibbons for this. I do enjoy romance in my books, but I don't want it right at the forefront, especially if it's a fantasy. And I'm very much viewing this as a fantasy challenge because my perfect book would be fantasy. So yeah, Emily Organ. She mastered that side plot romance. It's not main plot, and the plot would still progress without it, but it's just a really nice addition. She mastered it so well. Yeah. The next we've got hero. Who do I want to write my hero? I want my hero to write my hero. I want Robin Hobb to write my hero because she is just fabulous. I wanted to put Hobb under everything for this because to me, my perfect books already exist. Okay, just gonna say that my perfect books already exist. So I would have Hobb. She writes characters and heroes that are not. They're not boring. They're not overpowered. They're just ordinary people having to do extraordinary things and going through extraordinary misery. She really knows how to make her hero suffer, and I like to know that my hero suffered a little bit to get to where he got to, or a lot in Fitz's case. And yeah, she makes them relatable and lovable and frustrating. Honestly, I nearly put her for character, and it's a toss-up. I mean, technically, I really want her to do my character work. Who did I say for characters? Frederick Backman. It's a toss-up. But since Frederick Backman does really good characters, I'm like, you can do characters. Hobb focuses on the hero because she just does them brilliantly. Showing that, your hero doesn't have to be your typical hero. He doesn't have to be like the amazing fighter who goes running into battle. Your hero can be reluctant, and I love a reluctant hero trope. So yeah. Robin Hobb. Okay, so the next one is the last official prompt, but I also gave myself an additional one. You'll see in a minute. So the last official prompt is villain. Again, this is another one. I sat in front of these shelves for about 15 minutes solid, staring at all my books out. Everything's sort of like double stacked, so I'm like pulling them out, going, you, no, you, nope. Okay, what about you? No. Because villain is, I don't know, I read a lot of hero-driven, hero-focused books. I don't read a lot about the villains, and a lot of the books that I read don't necessarily have a central villain, or if it does have a villain that we're all fighting against, we don't spend a lot of time with them. So I really struggled with this one for a bit. And then there's a box over in the corner which has a whole bunch of books that I unhauled many, many months ago that I still haven't donated. Because it's really hard to get rid of books, guys, okay? It's really hard. But within there is my set of George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire. I've unhauled that, I'm sorry. I'm not. I'm really not sorry. And I thought, well, you know what? If there's anyone who's written characters that are nasty pieces of work that unfortunately I kind of understood at times, but that I also just love reading bad things happen about, it's going to be George R.R. Martin. So I think my villain has to be written by George R.R. Martin because he just writes really amazing, terrible characters. On a side note, I've unhauled them because I can't stand most of the characters. And you can't skip chapters for characters you don't like because you miss huge parts of the plot, and I wasn't enjoying reading them. What can you do? You can't please us all. But yeah, anyway, that is the end of the official challenge. But like I said, I gave myself one extra little prompt, and that was for narrator. Who is the perfect narrator? Now, I did look through all of this, and I did write down all these answers about a week ago, and I think I still agree with it. But I did write this answer down having literally just finished listening to a book he'd narrated. So I'm going with Lin-Manuel Miranda because I could listen to him. I don't know, I could listen to him read instructions or ingredient lists or anything. He's just wonderful. His voice is just so soothing. It doesn't want to put me to sleep, but it just really relaxes you and just really... He just did such an incredible job. He narrated Aristotle and Dante, and he just did such an incredible job that I found myself, I would put it on and I would be doing something and I would find myself just stopping whatever it was I was doing. Like my knitting would go down or whatever, and I just sit there listening because he just did such a fantastic job. He's so lovely and easy to listen to that, yeah, I want him narrating all of my books. I know that is selfish, but there you go. But yeah, anyway, this was my perfect book challenge. If you were to ask me these questions again in 6 months or a year, I can guarantee that barring one or two of them, they're gonna change because I'm fickle that way. So yeah, I might do this again this time next year. Who knows? But yeah, these were my answers for the time being. If you've made it this far, let me know who you want writing, doing various parts of your book, in the comments, and I will hopefully see you later for another video. Bye!